Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we are actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can still all be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it. Welcome back to Imperfect Momming, and we have a very special guest today, Jessica Speer. Welcome to Imperfect Momming.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Alysia. I'm excited to chat with you.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. I am an author of books for preteens and teens that all dive into some social emotional topics. I've got a background in social sciences, and I love to really unpack the tricky stuff that peaks in the preteen and the teen years. And, to write my books, what I do is tend to spend a lot of time with kids, and then the books grow out of that. So my first book, which is called BFF, or NRF, which stands for Not Really Friends, A Girl's Guide to Happy Friendships, grew out of a friendship program I ran for girls, preteen girls. And then my second book is just released this summer. It's called Middle School Safety Goggles Advised. And that book unpacks all the tricky stuff in middle school. And for that book, I worked with seventh graders to really get a deep understanding of, what is middle school like today? And that book kind of just dives into what they shared were the trickiest things, as well as how to navigate that.
Yeah, that's so exciting to me for multiple reasons, because I have a 10-year-old son who's in 5th grade, and then 6th grade is middle school, which is new to me because 7th grade was middle school for me. But he shared with me yesterday that he has his very first girlfriend, and it's official. I'm using air quotes if you're not watching the video. But I was like, what does that mean? And he goes, I don't know.
Well, that's one of the topics that kids wanted to talk to me about. They wanted to talk about crushes and dating. So I think it kind of means the same thing as when we were that age, where it's more of a public statement, that you are a thing in quotes, you're dating in quotes. But what I've heard is that kids aren't actually really going out on dates. Maybe with a group they're going to the movies, but it's more what they say, talking via text, and just like when we were that age, these things tend to be a little short-lived, and but it's one of those things. It starts at that age.
Yeah, I think my first boyfriend was in 5th grade, and it was like a 3-day thing, and
Yes.
that was it.
Yes, I think developmentally they're just dipping their toe in the water, just dipping their toe. But here's one interesting nugget, though, that I did hear from kids, 7th graders, is they wish there wasn't so much pressure to, in quotes, date. Like sometimes you just want to have a crush, and that's kind of fun. But as soon as the word gets out, that you have a crush, and say that other person actually has a crush on you, then the scene is doing everything they can to bring you guys together. And one quote I remember from some 7th graders, they said, gosh, dances would be so much more fun if there wasn't this pressure to date. They could just go and dance and have fun with their friends. So it's it's fun, and it's also tricky. Like sometimes they're like, oh, can't we just have fun? Can't we just be right on the verge of this stage but not be thwarted by our peers to get into this further? So it's just like everything in middle school, they're just walking this line of from kids to young adults. So there's a lot of back and forth there.
Yeah, and it's really interesting from my perspective, because I remember being a 5th grade girl, but I didn't have the insight into what a 5th grade boy was thinking or acting, and now I do, and it's a totally different side of the coin. And he said something along the same lines of, like, she
made it very clear that she had a crush on him. And he's like, I just kind of have crushes on who has crushes on me. Like if they like me, then I kind of like them back. And so and it's just cute.
I love that. Yeah, just kind of testing it out, and then some kids aren't even there yet, too. So in my book about middle school, I have the crush scale, because some kids who aren't even there yet, they feel like, is something wrong with me? So on the crush scale, there's some kids they're not even into this. Like, what is a crush again? And then the other side of the crush scale are there kids who are always have crush after crush, so just kids being aware of there's huge differences there, and they're all okay. They're all normal. They're all okay. They're all on their very own developmental path.
Yeah, no, I love it. I'm really intrigued by your book. And is it written for the teen or the
Yes.
or and okay.
Yeah, and I always write. I write for kids, and so that's kind of my specialty. And I like to write in really interactive ways. So, like this book, Middle School Safety Goggles Advice, has choose your own ending stories for the tricky things that students told me, because what I find is at this age they're experiencing so many things for the first time that they don't even know how to navigate that, like all of us. So when we are actually, something comes up that we've never dealt with before, we don't exactly know how to navigate that. So especially when it comes to preteens and their social world, a lot of this stuff is brand new, like gossip and cliques and drama. And so I've used choose your own endings just to show them how this might play out, based on their responses. How might you respond in this situation, so they can start to think about, if I do this, maybe this would happen. If I do this, so helping kids know they have choices, and this stuff is tricky. Sometimes it's really hard to know what to do in these situations.
I like this for multiple reasons. I'm going to keep saying I like this but my son's experience or idea of middle school is what he's read and slash or seen on Diary of a Wimpy Kid. And I'm like, this is not the be all to end all of what junior high is like. I mean, junior high was like pretty chill. Now I'm 40, so that was a minute ago.
Yeah. Yes.
But it's not all dramatized. And I've explained to him too, because I'm a writer and I write fiction romance, and like it's all about drama. Like you have to create the drama in order to keep the story moving and keep it interesting. And that's what Diary of a Wimpy Kid is it has to be dramatized, where whatever the kid's name is, I can't even remember, has a girlfriend, or his friend gets a girlfriend and stops hanging out with him so much, and it's not, and he feels bad, and this is all his friend's fault, and how come he gets a girlfriend and I don't have a girlfriend? I thought for sure I'd be the one to, just from the book that I had to listen to.
And I love that he's reading that book, which I think is hilarious. And what I see is the middle school experience is so different for everybody. Some kids, they are going to have kind of a lot of drama, and some kids are just going to sail right through. And it really depends on them, their personality, and also their group of friends. So it's our friends influence a lot of stuff in middle school. But one thing that I think is helpful for parents to know, that it is a huge time of change, and we can help our kids just know that change is okay. And, everybody's trying to figure it out. There was a study done at UCLA that followed 6,000 students through middle school at 23 schools, and they learned that in the first year middle school, 2/3 of them ended up changing their friendships. And why that's happening is, in elementary school, kids are basing their friendships very much on play and proximity. So, who they're playing with, who's in their class, but once we get to middle school, they're starting a new developmental phase where they're starting to look at who they are and what they like and what their interests are. And they have a lot of new kids to look at as friends. So there tends to be a shuffle there, but just helping kids know that that's okay. This is a new phase. Everybody's just, trying to find new friends and connect, and keeping their mind open to that. It can feel unsettling to some kids, all this change, but it's really normal. It's really normal. And we as parents can help frame that, so we don't, we frame it in a positive way that, yeah, sometimes change is hard, especially if we're not ready for that friendship to change. But, we have an opportunity to make a lot of new friends too.
Yeah. And it's true. I've often, observed that when you're a kid, it's like, well, you're kind of my size, let's go play. And that's how you make friends. And I always jumped to, as an adult, it's not that easy, but it's interesting that it kind of starts in junior high or around that 7th grade year. Was that the study?
Yeah, they and actually it's just the first year of middle school. So sometimes it's 6th, sometimes it's 7th, but there tends to be a lot of change in their social worlds that year. But again, not for everybody. So some kids, they end up, sailing through with the same group of friends. But for a lot of kids, there's a lot of changes there, and trying to figure out, where do I fit, and who are my friends, and what am I looking for in friendship? So this is all really important stuff for social emotional development. We start to look for different things in friendship. We start to figure out what kind of friend we are. So it could look unsettling, and sometimes parents can feel unsettled watching this, but some really important stuff is going on, in this process. They're figuring this all out, and they're figuring out more complex social groups, and status. Status becomes a thing too, for some kids in middle school.
Yeah, that's all really interesting. That's kind of a cool study to hear about. And then the other thing that I'll circle back to that I liked about your book is that you had to choose your own ending style, because a lot of times the expert says, this is what the problem is, this is how you solve the problem. And I think that in and of itself is a problem for multiple reasons, because I don't know about you, I don't like being told what to do, but there's people that are like, oh, well, the expert said so I'm going to do that. And it might not feel aligned for you, and it might not feel authentic for you to do what that expert is saying. And so kind of a choose your own ending for teens, I think, is huge, because you're starting young, teaching them those skills of how do you, how these are your choices, now make a choice. And I don't know about you, but when I would read choose your own ending books, I'd follow a path, and then I'd go back and I'd be like, okay, well,
for sure. Absolutely. That's why I put it in, because I would read all the endings, and that's what I hope kids do. So here's one example that I start with in the first chapter. So, you're in 7th grade, and you're going to sit down at your lunch table, and one kid in your school is trying to start this diversity club, and your lunch group is totally making fun of them. They are cutting them down. They're making fun of the people that might join. And so, what do? Option A, you join in the fun. Option B, you change the subject to something else. Option C, you defend the diversity club. And then there's always an option D. What else? What else might you do if you don't like any of these options? But just putting that out there shows them they have choices, because at this stage of life, more than any other stage, kids want to fit in. So that there's a lot of pressure there. So if they sit down at their lunch table and this is the conversation, it takes a lot of courage as a 6th or 7th grader to do some things, so we have to just, keep talking about that and, putting ideas out there, but realizing that fitting in is almost the number one priority of, these middle schoolers. So understanding the complexity of the situations that they're in.
Yeah, there was a guest on my show a while back that said something along the lines of, if we have to make a choice between fitting in, essentially being accepted, and being ourselves, we will choose being accepted 100% of the time, because that acceptance is so important to our, I'm adding this, our default survival mechanism.
Yep.
Because when we're born, we're literally dependent on the people taking care of us to live, and that never goes away. That feeling of I need other people to survive, that feeling really doesn't go away unless you're aware of it, you know?
Yes, and and it's even heightened in the preteen and the teen years because kids are individuating. So they're starting the process of pulling away from their parents, which can feel kind of vulnerable. So now there is a lot more reliance on their peers. And so, so this is really heightened, this fitting in piece. So it does help explain a lot of the behaviors that we see on the ground. This is tricky. It can sometimes feel like you said survival. Like, this is their survival. Acceptance and belonging is a human need for all of us, but especially during these adolescent years.
Yeah. And I just posted on Facebook the other day that my son allowed me to hug him, but I was not allowed to kiss him in front of his friend. And I was just like, oh, it's starting.
Yes, yes. Oh boy, here you go.
I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming. I wasn't ready.
Yes, and they circle back. They circle back once they have individuated. Then they come back. But it's an important process. But tough as parents to live through that. That the dynamic changes. But we are still still very much needed, and it's important to stay connected. It's important to keep talking and sharing, and we just have to be a little more aware of when the right moments to do that are.
So your books are, I love the way that you come about writing your books. And I think that that's, ingenious, is to obviously talk to the audience that it's written for, and get their input on, and then write it for them. I would imagine that in order for the preteens and teens to find and read the book, that you need to talk to the moms and / or the parents.
Yes, yes.
So what are some things that you say to moms to encourage them that this is something that their children, that will benefit their children?
And we touched on this a little bit, but what I do think is such a relief for parents is to stay really aware of the big picture of what's happening socially and emotionally for their kids. Because I think it's easy for us as parents to get caught up in the day-to-day and the little conflicts and the stress, and but if we can keep our eye on the big picture of what's happening developmentally and where they are, and just trying to stay connected to them, realizing they're in this phase, and how can we connect with them in a different way now that they're preteens and teens. I think parents find the books a relief too. I often hear that they look at them too. So if a parent happens to read Middle School Safety Goggles Advice, they are so right back in it. It reminds us of, oh right, that's how this is. Okay, I'm in this now, and so you can relate to your kids better because you understand what their social world is actually looking and feeling like. So yeah, you're right. I do talk a lot to parents, often through podcasts like yours, and so guest appearances, and I think it's just so helpful for all of us as parents to stay really attached to the big picture. Try to stay out of the nitty gritty day-to-day stuff and just keep guiding and supporting our kids to develop healthy relationship skills for themselves, and to start looking for relationships that feel that way too, looking for healthy, safe friendships. And that takes time because everybody's building these skills over time, but encourage them to keep looking out for that, because that's really important over the course of our lives, to have some really stable, healthy friendships. But for kids, that might not happen, until it might not settle out till they're almost 15 years. They'll have lots of friends, but they might not feel very long-term or very stable or supportive friendships until they really start to hone in on their relationship skills.
Yeah. And I would imagine that every parent is a different age when they have their children, but junior high was probably at least 20 years ago for you, when your child is now in teen, and our world has changed significantly in the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And just with social media and the the online bullying, all that stuff, that's not stuff that we had to deal with when we were kids. And so these are new waters to navigate. And we need to lean on people like you who take the time to ask the teens, because if I ask my child, or if someone asks their child and their child doesn't really feel like answering because you're the mom and they're afraid of what you're going to say to their answer, they probably had less of a guard up when you were talking with them.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up social media, because that students brought that up too. So when I asked what are the trickiest things about middle school, social media was on there. And so that wasn't something that we dealt with. And what I hear is it's tricky if you're on it, and it's tricky if you're not on it too. So if you're on it, it becomes something that they have to keep up with all the time, and it's hard to know what to post, and sometimes comments are inappropriate or misinterpreted, and it doesn't go away. So I think what's hard is when we were in middle school, when we finished school was done, but now it's for those on social media, it's just beginning. And the social media isn't designed really for this age group. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on there, and their young brains, so there's a lot of stuff going on there. But then, the flip side, if they're not on it, they can almost feel isolated. They could feel like, well, everybody else knows this TikTok dance. Everybody, so it can feel isolating. And, every school is different as to, what the age typically kids are getting on. It's a very personal decision for families, but it has made life more complicated for middle schoolers. And I feel like it's actually made them grow up a little faster. So now, instead of just chilling out after school or going hanging out with friends, it's the game on. Social world is on, with selfies and seeing who's doing what online. And so it's a different world out there when it comes to social media for kids these days, and it adds a little more pressure on them.
Yeah. And I don't envy them in any way, shape, or form. That's, I was daydreaming about my, our version of texting in high school was writing the little notes and then folding them in a cool way and then passing them in between classes. And my mom saved so much of my stuff. I was like, oh, now I'm wondering, did she read these? But she probably didn't know how to fold them back, so she probably never read them.
Yeah. No, I feel what I was hearing from kids is definitely a love-hate relationship and some nostalgia for what it might have been like to have life without this. It's a tricky thing. And now that I've got two in high school, they have a much better handle on it. I think it's tricky in middle school, again, because these technologies aren't designed for this age group. So once they're a little more older and a little more mature, they can navigate that a little differently, but it can be a lot for a young kid to deal with all the stuff going on online.
Yeah, and Facebook at least has a 13-year-old limit. Like, you're not allowed to get a Facebook until you're 13. And so, like you said, if you're on it or not on it, and that's going to be sometimes based on your parents, but a lot of for sure based on your age. If you're 13. And so now that's a whole nother status symbol. And that creates a lot of pressure for a mind and a body that's already under a lot of pressure because of changes and hormones and all of that.
Well, and actually all of the platforms, Instagram and TikTok, Snapchat, they all are 13 plus. And here's the reason why, and this is important for parents to know. There is a federal law that actually has been in place since the 90s, well before cell phones. It's called COPPA, Child Online Privacy and Protection Act. And so companies are not supposed to collect data and things like that for kids under 13. So that is why social media has that age limit. However, so many kids know some quick math to change, and get on there anyway. But it's important for parents to know that these platforms then believe your kids are older, because they lied about their age to get on these platforms, and the platforms are not designed for them. The big Facebook/Instagram files that came out to show that, preteen girls are especially vulnerable with, there's a lot of stuff about body image and unrealistic expectations that can be really detrimental to preteen girls when they're in that vulnerable place of, going through puberty themselves. So it's Congress is still trying to catch up. They're working on a bill now that's that COPPA 2.0, like now in the year 2022, they're working on that. How I see it is the guardrails haven't been put in place yet for kids when it comes to technology and privacy and safety. Technology has moved so much faster than lawmakers that we're not there yet. So actually, I wrote another book on this. So next summer, I have a book coming out, August 2023. It's called The Phone Book. Just knowing that so many kids are getting online so early, I wanted to write a book for kids about that. And it includes all sorts of safety things, so from stranger danger to disinformation to social media to privacy. It's, if we're going to give kids this technology, it's really important for parents and kids to know what they have in their hands.
Yeah. I was actually impressed that they had such a thing in the 90s to protect kids.
Yes, that's when we were just getting online. The internet was just coming about, and we put a law in place, and then there hasn't been much added to that since.
Which is not surprising to me, but it was surprising that they even thought about it in the first place. But it's good to know that they're working on it. And I used to work for Yosemite National Park, and I worked in the Wawona Hotel, which is a national or historical building. And so I used to joke that to change a light bulb was an act of Congress, because you're making a change to the hotel, and inside that joke is, how long it takes, like for Congress to do things. And because so much is political that doesn't need to be, when it's just like, let's protect the kids, that doesn't need to be a political thing, but then all the people that have their fingers in it make it a political thing.
But luckily, there's some senators actively working on this. So fingers crossed, we will start, and it'll just be a beginning. Like, we have a long way to go, but they will start to put some of these things in place, to protect the next generation of kids. This generation kind of slipped through, but the next one, maybe we can have this figured out.
Yeah. Well, that's encouraging to me, because I'll choose to be optimistic about it. And this, poor Gen Z. But I actually heard that Gen Z is now, they're called Zoomers, which I thought was hilarious, because they're as far from the boomers as possible. Yes, they can get, and now they're calling them Zoomers, and I just think that's hilarious. But
and it's, these kids, they are, because they're so connected, they really are very much aware of their world and what's happening. And I think they feel a lot of stress by that, because they've been exposed to so much. I know my daughters are super concerned about the news they see online, whether it's climate change or, they're very aware and they're very concerned. So my hope is, when these guys are leading, they can really start to make some positive changes in the world. It's a pretty, in my opinion, it's a really impressive generation. They've grown up with a lot of tough stuff, whether it be online stuff to pandemics to, you name it, but they've grown up with some tough stuff. So I do love Gen Z.
Yeah, my son's teacher is Gen Z, and my son is Gen Z. So she's like the first couple of years of it, and he's the last year of it. And he just loves that she understands his memes.
Yes.
I'm like, yeah, because I don't.
Yep.
I don't think your memes are funny at all.
I love that.
So is there a piece of advice that you want to share with our mom listeners?
Well, one, just keep doing what you're doing. I love that all the moms and dads are listening to this, and we are all trying to do the very best we can, so this generation of parents is doing amazing stuff. I wish I had a lot of the resources that today's parents do, because of, podcasters like you putting stuff out there where we are trying to stay informed and aware and, doing the best we can for our kids. So my advice is just keep doing exactly what you're doing.
That's beautiful, because we don't hear you're doing a good job very often, and you're doing the right thing, and we hear a lot about how we're not doing the right thing, and how we should be doing something else or something different, and so it's nice to hear you're doing great.
You guys are doing great. Keep doing it. Keep showing up, keep doing it.
And is there a book that's been instrumental in your personal development journey?
Oh my gosh, I was thinking about this. I have so many, but one that I am going to recommend that has been really helpful to me as a mom of girls is Untangled by Dr. Lisa D'Amour, and it really unpacks developmentally what happens for girls. And actually, boys aren't that different. There is another version of that called, it's not written by her, but it's called Raising Cain, the Emotional Life of Boys, which I think is really interesting too. But I think as a parent, that's been so helpful to me to know what is going on developmentally for my kids, because then I can better support them.
Yeah, that's, it's all, we have access to so much now. And a lot of I talk to a lot of people that have some pretty deep anger issues towards their parents for not doing different and knowing better, and it's like, you have the access to the world and your parents did not.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that not only did they not have it, and so give them grace, and we have it, so we have a responsibility to use it to the best of our ability, and to use it to better ourselves for our children, so that our children are not like, well, you had the internet, what was your problem? How come you messed me up so bad?
Yes, I love it. I couldn't agree more. Well said.
Yes. And tell us where we can find you.
The easiest place to find me is my website, Jessica Speer, SPEER.com. And that's got links off to all my socials, links to places you can buy my books. And I do have a free monthly e-newsletter that talks all about social emotional topics for kids and families. And that's on my website too.
Awesome. And your books are on Amazon?
Amazon, Target.com, Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are sold.
Yeah. So I have a rule of not buying physical copies of books because I have too many physical copies of books. But your teen guide to what's it called? To junior high.
A middle school safety goggles advised. Yeah.
Middle school safety goggles. So that's going to be some required reading this summer in our household. And I think just to give a different perspective than what he sees in just Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Yep, exactly. And he's gonna love it. There'll be a roller coaster. He'll have ups and downs, but it's a new phase. So how exciting!
Yeah, and I don't think he's ever seen a complete your own ending or choose your own ending book. So that's, I feel like that's a blast from the past.
Yes.
And I think that's really cool, and I think he'll enjoy that as well.
And and so he can skip right to that. So the book is designed so that you can kind of read what the topic is, and I like to throw in there the reason we do these things, like why as humans do we gossip, and then every chapter ends with a choose your own ending. So he can flip through and choose to read whatever he wants to. I wrote it as a kind of a guide that kids can go back to, because if they're not in the middle of dealing with something like that, they might not want to think about it, but once it comes up, they can go back to that chapter, whether it's bullying or whether it's gossip or crushes, and they can kind of check back in and see what they think, as they're experiencing it right then in their lives.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. So, well, thank you so much for being on my podcast and for the work you're doing in the world. I think that's amazing. I don't hear a lot about, stuff for tweens and teens. I feel like there's a lot more for, babies, and that's it.
Yeah, kids are so smart. They're so smart. So I'm excited to put stuff out for. They're ready for all this stuff. So that's why I write for kids. They are ready for all this.
Yeah.
And thank you for having me and for all that you do. It's really important work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And so we'll have another episode next week of Imperfect Momming. And until then, keep healing. Bye, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit AlysiaLyons.com. That's AlysiaLyons.com. See you next time.